Okay, so we are up to the Mishnah, Shor Hamazik Rishus Hanizik. Zog Tehelig Mishnah. Shor Hamazik Rishus Hanizik Ketzah. We learned that Shor Hamazik Rishus Hanizik is a Machloikis Tanoim. This is our Mishnah discusses it if the Shor pays Nezek Shalom or not. Ketzad Nogach Noshach Rovatz Bat. Again, these are all the different ways of dancing at a Litvisha Hausner, as we discussed, or pushing at a Chassidische Tish. If this happened, B'shus HaRabim, which are all actions of Karen, Mishalem Chati Nezek, B'shus HaNizek, if it occurs, then we have a Reb Tarfon Shita. Reb Tarfon Noimer Nezek Shalem, V'chachamim Oimrim Chati Nezek. There's no difference between Rishus HaRabim and Rishus HaNizek. Karen always pays Chati Nezek according to the Chachamim, but according to Reb Tarfon, it pays Nezek Shalem. What is the Mekar of Reb Tarfon's halacha? Where did he get it from? Reb Tarfon tells us he made a kal v'chomer. Amar lehem Reb Tarfon, Uma b'mokoim shehekel al hashen v'al regel Rishus HaRabim shu poter madach in Rishus HaRabim where shein in regel is poter. Nevertheless, hichmer aleyan Rishus HaNizik l'shalom nezek shalom. Nevertheless, in Rishus HaYochid, the payment for shein and regel will be nezek shalom. Mokem shehichmer ala keren. So keren, which is chomer in Rishus HaRabim, l'shalom chati nezek, ein oidin shenachmer alov Rishus HaNizik l'shalom nezek shalom. Surely, we should be machmer on keren to pay nezek shalom. So basically, madach keren pays chati nezek in Rishus HaRabim. Kol shekin keren should pay nezek shalom Rishus HaNizik. That was the kal v'chomer. The problem with that kal v'chomer is we're learning more to the learnee than is being taught from the learner. In other words, the whole kal v'chomer is based on that keren pays an excessive amount in Rishus HaRabim. It pays chati nezek, which is excessive compared to the zero of shein v'regel. So keren is so chomer. So surely keren is more chomer than shein v'regel, and therefore it should pay nezek shalom. Or surely keren Rishus HaYochid, Rishus HaNizik should be more chomer than keren Rishus HaRabim, and it should pay nezek shalom. That was the kal v'chomer that Rav Tarfon made. Amar loy, they told him back, Dayoy lovoy min hadin aliyos kanida. There's a rule in kal v'chomers that wherever you're learning from, you cannot extract more and apply it to what you're learning to from where you're learning from. So Zok the Gemara, Zok the Mishnah, Ma b'shus harabim chati nezek. What is the whole chumrah that you're showing by Karen hinge upon the fact that in Rishus HaRabim it pays chati nezek? So that's the maximum you have to learn to Rishus HaYochid, to Rishus HaNizik. Ab Rishus HaNizik chati nezek. Zok Rashi, Daya Ilavim in Adin Liyosh Kanidai. Karen B'shus HaNizik. Karen B'shus HaNizik is the linchpin of this entire, the hinge, its entire koyach of this kal v'chomer. It's the fact that Karen pays Rishus HaRabim, it pays nezek, it pays chati nezek. So therefore, Karen B'shus HaNizik, Shata Mevi, Midin Karen B'shus HaRabim. The halacha that you're trying to teach to Karen B'shus HaNizik, it all hinges on the koyach that we see Karen has in Rishus HaRabim, because the Ka'amar Karen shehichmer Allah B'shus HaRabim. So Einodin shenachmer Allah B'shus HaNizik. But we have to limit what we learn to where we're learning from. The whole koyach of the chaymer of Karen is because of Karen B'shus HaRabim, and Karen B'shus HaRabim only pays chati nezek. That's all you could extract. Now the problem is, if you limit the kal v'chomer to only apply to chati nezek, then the kal v'chomer hasn't really taught you anything at all. So that is what the Gemara is going to tell us is the machlekes between your Tarfon and the Chacham. Do you say Dayoy, even if the kal v'chomer will then be completely neutralized, or maybe you only say Dayoy if the kal v'chomer will still be able to see there's something, but it won't be completely neutralized. This Kal V'chomer seemingly will be completely neutralized if you say Dayai, and therefore Reb Tarfon maybe wouldn't say Dayai. Amar Lahem, so Reb Tarfon said, let's see if I could modify the Kal V'chomer to avoid the restriction of Dayai. And this is what he said. Ani, loy adoin keren mi keren. I'm not learning keren from keren. Because the way we express the Kal V'chomer, we're learning keren from keren. Keren, b'shus harabim, which is chomer, surely keren, b'shus, a nizik should be more chomer, should be even more chomer than it is b'shus harabim. That's not what I'm saying, Dr. Meir. Let me modify it a little bit. Lo adon keren mi keren, rather, ani adon keren mi regel. I'm going to learn keren from shein regel. And this is what I'm going to say. Uma b'mokim sh'hakel al shein b'la regel. Madich in rishus harabim, where we're makel with shein v'regel. Nevertheless, rishus harabim hichmir. So madich shein regel, where it's chomer in rishus hanizik, and it pays nezek shalom. Surely keren should pay nezek shalom just like shein and regel. So we're sort of putting the focus on shein v'regel. So therefore, b'keren mokem shehichmer. So not nachmal. Loy adon keren mi keren, rather than the adon keren mi regel. Umab b'mokem shekel al shein v'al regel versus rabim, where we were b'shein v'regel, we were mekel in versus rabim. Nevertheless, hichmer, we're going to be machmer b'keren, meaning keren will pay chati nezek in versus rabim. Mokem shehichmer al shein v'al regel versus nezek, where we're being makbid to pay nezek shalom. There's a chomer even by shein v'regel. Because it pays nezek shalom b'shus hanizik, ein adin shenachmer b'keren. So it's a slight modification. We're saying madich shein v'regel pays nezek shalom in rishus hayachid in rishus hanizik. Surely keren should as well. So the Chum said that's just window dressing. At the end of the day, the whole koyach, the battery of this Kal V'chomer is based on the fact that keren pays b'shus harabim chatzi nezek. Therefore, amru lo daya lovim adin liyosh kadim. Ma b'shus harabim chatzi nezek. Just like in Rishus Harabim, keren only plays Chatzi Nezek, and that really is the underlying force of your entire Kal V'chomer. Ap Rishus HaNizek, Chatzi Nezek. So the first question we have to ask over here is, what would be the halacha? What would be the halacha if not what would be the halacha? We know the halacha is, according to the Man Damar who holds, the Chatzi Nezek of keren, Rishus Harabim, is Knas. What about the nezek shalom? What about the nezek shalom of keren in rishus rabim in rishus hayachid? According to Tarfon, keren rishus nezek pays nezek shalom. Is that also a knas, or is that maybe mamana? We're only got a shein v'regel.
Is that ever a shaila about the nezek shalom?
Well, I'm asking you right now. The nezek shalom of keren, that according to Tarfon you pay in Rishus HaYachid, sorry?
How would you think nezek shalom is a knas?
Because keren is something that's not a normal thing. The same way Chatzi Nezek is a knas in Rishus Harabim, maybe it should be a knas, it's also a knas Rishus HaYachid.
Maybe you pay nezek shalom only when it's a mu'in.
No, Rav Tarfon is saying even a tam will pay nezek shalom b'shus hanizik. According to Tarfon, that a tam pays nezek shalom b'shus hayachid b'shus hanizik, is that knas or is that mom? Now there's another shaila. If it's a knas, if it's mom, no problem. If it's a knas, then it's an einish. So why don't we have a problem of ein einshin min adin? There's a rule ein einshin min adin, right? You don't give an einish to a Kal V'chomer, right? There's three possible reasons why ein einshin min adin. There's three possible svars. One svar is maybe we're going to find out one day that your logic was wrong, and you're going to punish somebody by mistake. The second reason why we say ein einshin min adin is, what is the Kal V'chomer? The Kal V'chomer is madich keren b'shus harabim pays chati nezek. Surely it should pay b'shus harabim at least the same amount, right? If you have a Kal V'chomer, how do you know that einish is good enough, right? Madich, this Russia gets chenek, Koshkin, this Russia gets chenek. Maybe this Russia chenek won't be a kapara. Maybe this Russia needs skila, right? So ein einshin min adin, because could be the punishment that you're using a Kal V'chomer for is not good enough. meaning it won't give you a proper kapara. So what should we do? That's another shot. There's a third shot in the Inoichim in Adin that I forgot. That I forgot what the third shot is. But I'll call upon I believe the Rashash says that when do you say the Rashash asks this kasha? Why isn't it Inoichim Adin? If you hold that Lezek Sholim by a tam, according to a tarif, is a knas, I Inoichim Adin. The Rashash has a chiddush. Inoichim Adin is to fabricate something new because of a kal v'chomer. That's where you'll say Inoichim Adin. But we already know the oynish of Karen, and we already know that the oynish of Karen b'shus harabim is chatzin nezek. All we're using the kal v'chomer for is to give us details in how you apply the halach of Karen. That would not be considered ein oynish of That's what the Rashash says. The Rashash was not a Rosh Hashiva. The Rashash was a banker, we know. But he has a comment on almost every daf of Shas. So he puts a lot of pressure on us Balabatim. Because he was a banker, he was probably a busy guy. We know he was a busy guy because of the famous story with his loan. You know the famous story with Rishash's loan? Rishash was a banker. And one day a guy comes in. Oh, you know the story?
I think you said it was where he thought he never paid. But
that's right. And he really did pay because he shoved it in his Gemara. Okay, so we'll look at that story maybe another day because today we have a lot of Gemara. Zog to Gemara. So let's see the Gemara inside. Rabbeinu Tam. I'm so tired and I'm so mixed up. I'm not even reading the words right. Rab Tarfin. So tomorrow, Rab Tarfin less lay dayoi. Are you telling me that Rab Tarfin ignores dayoi? You can't ignore dayoi because dayoi dayraisu. I'm going to illustrate to you, Dr. Gemara, that the restriction of dayoi, which limits the scope of a kal v'chomer, is a dayraisu. Rashi says, "Kabayud gimel midos b'toyres kahanim b'din kal v'chomer." So when the Gemara Toras Kahanim, Bryce and Toras Kahanim discusses the Yud Gimel Midos, specifically the Kal V'chomer, it tells us that it has a limitation, the limitation of Dayai. Netanya, Midin Kal V'chomer cases. Let's analyze the Kal V'chomer. The source of Kal V'chomer in the Torah is from a fascinating story when Miriam became Mitzoras, when she spoke ill about Moshe Rabbeinu. And by Yoay Hashem al Moshe, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, how should we deal with Miriam? And this is what Hashem said. V'avia yorek yorek b'faneh haloi shikalim shivashamim madich, if her father would have spit in her face, meaning her father wanted to be mavaza her. Her father wanted her to be shamed. So we, for sure, 7 days is where she would be locked in shame. Kal v'chomer l'shchina. Surely, the Shechina, which is so much greater than just a Basa V'dam, surely she should be in seclusion michutz lamachana for 14 days. That's a logical kal v'chomer. Surely HaKadosh Baruch Hu's his excommunication should be a 14-day period. So you might think that it's just saying, yeah, it's probably double HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's actually a scientific calculation to why the cherem of the Rabbanim Shalom should be twice that of a Basar V'dam. And Tosfos tells us right over here, where does the calculation come from? Yishum damrinim b'hamapelas she'av v'aim noistim boy kol echad heidvarim. Each one of its parents, its father and its mother, gives 5 things. They contribute 5 things to the child. HaKadosh Baruch Hu noisim b'yudvar, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives 10 items. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu's stake, so to speak, in each child is twice that of each of the parents. It's 2 heskeros. The ein hesker, normally a hesker, when you lock up someone who has tziras, they're locked up for 7 days, so 14 days is twice that. Okay, so Zok to Gemara, that would be the kal v'chomer if it wasn't for the limitation. Yet, Ella, since the whole source of any type of excommunication, of hesker, of seclusion, is the father, and the father is only 7 days, so we limit the kal v'chomer that would have otherwise taught us 14 days to a mere 7 days.
Where do we know this first 7?
Because the father would normally have the Irish is nicht ärger than the father.
But wait a minute. This are given as if the father.
So you're asking me. We need 7 days. So you're telling me it's not mifrach kavachomer. So that's a good point. You're asking a good point, and the Gemara is going to actually bring that up. Zakt Gemara, maybe you could say, Ki lesle dayai, where does Reb Tarfon reject dayai? Heicha de mifrach kavachomer. That's if you say dayai, it's ois kavachomer. But heicha de loy mifrach kavachomer, if you could still learn something from the kavachomer, but not as much as you wanted to, because dayai limits it, isle dayai, then maybe Reb Tarfon would hold of dayai. So therefore, Reb Tarfon could agree to this Teres Kahanim. Teres Kahanim says that if you learn something from the Kal V'chomer anyway, then you'll say dayai. But in Reb Tarfon's case, if I don't learn Nezek Sholem, then Chati Nezek I already know. I don't need a Kal V'chomer for it. So therefore, I'm going to be totally neutralizing the Kal V'chomer unless you say that in Rishus HaNizik, you're going to pay Nezek Sholem. Zakt Gemara, Hasam Shiva Deshchina Leksivi. How do you know the first 7? I think that's what the plan was asking. How do you know the first 7? So you need the Kal V'chomer to tell you that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Miriam her tzaras, that even 7 days, because it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that she gets 7 days. We only know it from the Kal V'chomer. So if that's the case, that's why you say dayai over there. Because it's not Mivra Kal V'chomer. 7 days is also something that the Torah didn't specify, that through the Kal V'chomer we'll learn that she'll have to be in Cherem for 7 days. So therefore, also Kal V'chomer, ICR Pesar, the Kal V'chomer really will teach us 14 days. So dayai apik shiva v'uki shiva. It reduces the impact of the Kal V'chomer by 7, and it limits the limit of the Kal V'chomer to 7 days of seclusion that Miriam would have to go. Aval hacha, but when you look at our case, Chati Nezek Siv, there's already a pasuk that teaches us that Karen pays Chati Nezek. But also Kal V'chomer, but I see Chati Nezek Achrina. The Kal V'chomer is telling us that in Rishus HaNizik, Karen Tam should pay a second Chati Nezek, and as a sum total, the Nasa Nezek Sholem. Either Ashta Dayai, if you're going to apply the limitation of Dayai to this Kal V'chomer, if Rechle Kal V'chomer, I'll actually learn nothing at all from the Kal V'chomer at all. V'Rabbanon, the Rabbanon say that's exactly the case by Miriam. By Miriam, if you limit it to 7, you've totally neutralized the Kal V'chomer. You're going to ask me, how would I have known 7 anyway? Shiva de Shechina Ksivi. It says Aloisi Sager Shivas Yamim. So the Torah tells us right over there, as it says in the pasuk, Vayoyim Hashem al Moshe Vavia Yorak B'Fanea Haloisi Kalim Shivas Yamim Tisager Shivas Yamim. So since it says Tisager Shivas Yamim, it teaches us that we knew about the 7 days anyway. So from the Kal V'chomer, I should have used 14 days, and you see that here it's also this is also a Kal V'chomer, that if I try to apply dayai, I'm totally neutralizing the Kal V'chomer, and yet you still say dayai, and therefore they argue in Reb Tarfon, and they say in our case as well, you should still say dayai. Reb Tarfon, what is Reb Tarfon going to do? Hahuti Sager did Arshinon dayahu. How do I know from the Torah that? How do I know from the Torah that you say dayai? Hechad lo mifrach Kal V'chomer. I know it from right there. That's exactly where I know it from. Zokt Rashi. Rav Tarfon Hahuti Sager is Lashminon. Did Ashinan Dayhu also? That's exactly what the Torah is telling us there. Tisager Shivas Yamim. You know why? Because you say dayai heichad lo mifrach Kal V'chomer. This is the actual makor of dayai. The likes of hachi have a makmin lebabeser. If the Torah wouldn't have said that as a result of the Kal V'chomer, she sits in seclusion for 7 days, I would have thought that the Kal V'chomer, the result of that Kal V'chomer is 14 days. Zok the Torah, this is how you apply dayai. So Tisager Shivas Yamim isn't to tell us that we would have known anyway that she's 7 days in seclusion. Tisager Shivas Yamim is telling you, you know how you process such a Kal V'chomer? You process it with dayai, because in this case it won't be mifrach Kal V'chomer. Beautiful. Rabbanon, Ksiv krachrina. According to the Rabbanan, I don't need Tisagar Shivas Yomim to tell me the halacha of Dayoy, because I have another pasuk that says she was locked up for 7 days, and that would be the one that's teaching us the halacha of Dayoy. It says Vatisagar Miriam. So in the next pasuk it says after this Kavachimer, Vatisagar Miriam Michut Machana Shivas Yomim Va'amle Nosa Ate Yosef Miriam. So Zokter Rabbanan, we knew anyway from a different place that she was going to sit for 7 days. Nevertheless, the Torah still makes this Kavachimer. So it's a Kavachimer that if you say Dayoy on it, it totally neutralizes the Kavachimer. Yet the pasuk still makes Dayoy. So Zogin the Chachamim, we say Dayoy even Heicha the Mivrach Kavachimer. Rabbi Tam says Rabbi Tarfon says Ahu Dafilu Ba'alma Darshin and Dayoy. The reason why the Torah repeats it again, but Yisrael Miriam, is to tell you that not only do we say Dayoy in the case of Moshe Rabbeinu, any Kavachimer in the Torah, you also say Dayoy, but that's only Heicha the Loy Mivrach Kavachimer. V'loy Tomer Hacha. Rabbi Tam, I keep on mixing up. Frek Rav Tarfon, why do I need a pasuk to tell me everywhere in the Torah you say Dayoy? Why can't I learn it from a Binyanab? It says, here we know there's a halacha of Dayoy, so automatically it applies everywhere else in the Torah. Why do I need a special pasuk to broadcast this halacha of Dayoy to the L'chol Torah Kula? Because I would have said, if I only know you say Dayoy in the case of Moshe Rabbeinu and Miriam, I would have said, Hacha b'shem kvoidi shel Moshe. Maybe because of the honor of Moshe, we limit her excommunication to 7 days. But maybe anywhere else you don't say Dayoy. Because maybe there's a special reason why you said Dayoy over here. That's why the Torah has to say an extra time, Shivas Yomim, to tell us that Dayoy is a restriction to Kal V'chomers anywhere in the Torah, Kamash Malon, that it applies everywhere. So at the end of the day, we have a machlokes, how to darshan the psukim by the story of Miriam getting tzaras. Do you learn from there that you say Dayoy no matter what? Or do you only learn from there that you say Dayoy if it would not slug up the Kal V'chomer? But if it completely neutralizes the Kal V'chomer, then you don't say Dayoy, and that has an impact in our sugya, because in our sugya it seems that the Kal V'chomer, if you apply Dayoy, it would eliminate the Kal V'chomer, and therefore Rav Tarfon says you don't say Dayoy.
Understand, but this rule of Shivas Yomim wasn't a rule before Hashem made it here. So how can you learn from after the fact? Azach.
I hear. Okay. It's a good horror, but that's what the Gemara says. Amalei Rav Papa Abaye. Rav Papa told Abaye, "V'hahai Tana, the loy darish Dayoy. I'm going to give you an example of a Tana who does not darshan Dayoy. V'afagav the loy mifra kavochem. I'm going to show you an example of someone who doesn't say Dayoy, even echad the loy mifra kavochem, which is a step ahead. In other words, he totally rejects Dayoy completely. Who totally rejects Dayoy completely? The Tanya. The halacha is, if a regular person who's not a Zav has keri, and that keri touches something, it will be metama what it touched. And that thing will be tamei for the day. You could toivel it, and then it becomes tar. Unless it's food. But we're talking about the begodim or kalim, right? What if keri is on a rock, and that rock is on a beged, and you lift up the beged, thereby you're carrying the keri, even though the beged's not directly touching it. That's called tumas. Masa, the beged becomes tummy. Because the beged carried the keri, even though it carried the keri. I didn't think of that. The beged carried the keri, even though it didn't touch it. That's called tumas masa.
And the rock itself is not tumah, because
the rock is not makabel. So it cannot transmit the tumah through the gia. Now, the halacha is a Zav is even more tummy than a regular person. So if a Zav saw keri, would it have the same halacha as a regular person that saw keri? So you might think, why should it be worse? Good question, but it's still different. Now, any other of the mashkas that come out of a Zav, for instance, the saliva of a Zav is metame both b'magu v'masa. The question is, what about the keri of a Zav? So the Gemara says, the Tanya, keri b'zav minai. How do you know that the keri of a Zav is metame b'magu v'masa? Vidinu, if you think about it, it's a kal v'chomer. Ma tahar b'tahar. Madich the saliva, which the saliva of a person who's tar is tar. You could touch anything, you could touch Paris of truma, and it won't have any impact on it because the saliva that comes out of a person who's tar is tar. Nevertheless, tamei b'tamei, the saliva of a zav that touches anything, or the saliva of a zav that's carried by anything, will be tamei b'magu v'masa. So tamei b'tahar, carry, which even when it comes out of a person who's tar, a person who's not a zav, it is mitama b'magu v'masa. Einay din shehei mitama b'tamei. Surely the carry of a zav should also be mitama. That was the Gemara's kavachem. The kamaisila and this brisa uses this as a proof. Bein lemaga, bein lemasa, that the carry of a zav is mitama side by maga, side by masa. Unfortunately, I made a mistake when I told you the halacha of carry. When carry is matama, it's not matama b'masa. It was my mistake. Carry is only matama if it touches something. But if you carry, then it will not become tummy. So carry of a tahar person is only matama b'maga. The Gemara through a kavachomer, the Brisa through a kavachomer wants to tell us the carry of a zav should be matama b'maga ub'masa. And the kavachomer is madich saliva, which is completely tahar by a tahar. If it comes out of the mouth of a zav, it's matama b'maga ub'masa. Carry, which is matama b'maga of a tahar person, surely carry of a zav should be matama b'maga ub'masa. That's very similar to al kal v'chomer here of chatzei nezek and nezek shali. But the problem is v'mai nema hani kal v'chomer v'maga and the hani dayoy lafukimasa. If you hold of dayoy, and which we said even if Parvin holds of dayoy, heicha deloy mifrach kal v'chomer. This is a classic case because I can use the kal v'chomer to teach us that the carry of a zav is matama b'maga. I can apply the kal v'chomer there, and I can use dayoy to say that the carry of a zav will not be mitama b'masa. So Freit Chaim, why do I need a kal v'chomer to teach you that the carry of a zav is mitama b'maga? If a carry of a Torah is mitama b'maga, its carry is carry. So it's mitama b'maga anyway.
And second of all, it's like any other liquid.
The chitema l'maga lo yitzrach. And if you're going to tell me I don't need a kal v'chomer, l'maga lo yitzrach kal v'chomer, I don't need a kal v'chomer to tell you that the carry of a zav is mitama b'maga. The legar megaver tar. Why should the carry of a person that's tamei of a zav be less tamei than the carry of someone who's a tar person? So I don't need a kal v'chomer for that. The kal v'chomer is only relevant for the masa, and there, if you don't say that it's mitama b'masa, then you're totally wiping out the kal v'chomer.
Itself a kal v'chomer.
What do you mean?
Doesn't say the bearish that a tummy is tummy.
It says carry is tummy. Why should it be less tummy if it came out of a tummy person? So I don't know if you get a kal v'chomer for that. It's the same carry. The fact that he became tummy mishum should make us carry tar. That's not logical. I don't think that's a kal v'chomer. It's more like bechlal masai yimana. Bechlal masai yimana. Zok Gemara itzrich. Zok Gemara itzrich. No, I actually need a kal v'chomer to tell us that even the carry of a zov is mitam b'maga. You know why? Sol kedai dechamina. I would have thought when it talks about the tum of carry, it says ki yibecha ish asher lo yiyatahar mikre loyla. So mikre loyla ksiv. It says that the carry came out mikre loyla. Misha karyoi goyrim loy. The only type of person whose carry is mitama b'maga is someone that only tamei because the carry caused it. Yotzazeh she'ein karyoi goyrim loy. So I actually have a dik from a pasuk, although it's hard to imagine why that should be the reason, but I have a dik from the pasuk that might tell us that the carry of a zav is not matama. So since I have a pasuk that seems to indicate that the carry of a zav is not matama, I would need a kal v'chomer to teach me that the carry of a zav is at least matama even b'maga. El dover achagorim loy. It was caused by something else. What the tumah wasn't caused by the carry. The tumah is there anyway because of the zav. Maybe this carry is not matama b'maga. Kamash malon. Frakt Gemara, that doesn't make sense. Midi v'loida v'rachiksiv. Well, because it says mikri loila, you're going to boyosh your own diet that it doesn't apply to somebody who was tummy already. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that anywhere. It's just a mikri loila. So you can't boyosh your own chiddush that because there's another tumah here, suddenly there's no tumahs carry. That's not logical. So in fact, I don't need the kal v'chomer at all to tell me that the carry of a zav is mitama b'tumas maga. It's no different than the carry of a tahar, and therefore the only thing I can learn from the kal v'chomer is that the carry of a zav is also mitama b'masa. And if you apply daya to that kal v'chomer, you're going to totally obliterate the kal v'chomer. So you don't have a raya from this tana that you don't say daya even hecha daloi mifrach kal v'chomer, because in this case of zav, if you apply daya, it will destroy the kal v'chomer. So that's not a good example of a Tana who doesn't hold of Dayai, even Hechad Laimifar Chalachai. Fragt Gemara, Uman Tana, the Shamitlei. Who is the Tana that says, the Amar Shich Vazera, Shel Zov, Mitama B'masa? We just said a halacha, we just quoted a brisa that said that the Shich Vazera of a Zov is Mitama B'masa, and we learn it from a Kal V'chomer. And the reason why we learn it from the Kal V'chomer is if we didn't learn it from the Kal V'chomer and we apply Dayai, there would be no Kal V'chomer at all. So who is the Tana of this brisa? Loi Rabbi Lozer, it's not consistent with the Shita of Rabbi Lozer, but Loi Rabbi Yeshua. And it's not consistent with the Shita of Rabbi Yeshua. It's not we learned. Shich Vazer Shel Zov, Metama B'maga, Ve Metama B'masa. Rabbi Eliezer. So surely the brisa we just quoted that says that the Shich Vazer of Zov is Metama B'masa, surely that's not consistent with Rabbi Eliezer. Because Rabbi Eliezer said black and white. It's not Metama B'masa. So Rabbi Eliezer is off the books for this Tana. Maybe it's Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Af Matama B'masa. No, the Shich V'zera of Azov is Matama B'masa. Oh, it sounds promising. It sounds like there's a Tumah in the Shich V'zera of Azov, but not so fast. You know why the Shich V'zera of Azov is Matama B'masa? Levisha Yevsher V'loitzich Tzuche Ziva. When Shich V'zera comes out of Azov, there's probably some droplets of Ziva inside him because he's Azov. So when the Shich V'zera flushes it out, it's going to flush out Ziva too. I think the Gemara asks, what about Meiraglayim? What if he goes to the bathroom? He should also flush out any Ziva involved. But the fact is, it's inevitable that when Shich V'zera comes out, it's going to be accompanied by Ziva. And the Tumah of Masa is because there's Ziva here, not because there's Shich V'zera here. Let me just finish the sugya. So Adkan loy kam Rabbi Yeshua Hasham. That Rabbi Yeshua said that the Shich V'zera of Azov is Matam B'masa. That's not because of the Shich V'zera. It's Elashei Avsher, but Loitzich Tzuche Ziva. It's because we know for sure there's Ziva here. Halavachi, if there are no Tzuche Ziva, if I could somehow figure out, analyze it scientifically, and confirm that there's zero content of Ziva here, Loi, the Shich V'zera in and of itself would not be Matama. So clearly, Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer both disagree with our brisa, because our brisa says that the Shich V'zera of Azov is Matama B'mas. Elahai Tanu. Maybe it's a different Tana. Now, so we're looking for a Tana that we could say holds that the Shich V'zera of Azov is Matama B'masa. It's not be learned. Lamai Lamehen. The Mishnah is listing off different levels of Tumah. So the next level of Tumah, turning on Tumah base, is Zoivoi Shel Zov, the actual Ziva of the Zov, which we know is Matama B'maga Uvamasa, V'roikoi, and the saliva of a Zov that we know is Matama B'maga Uvamasa. The Shich V'zaroi and the Shich V'zara B'zov is Matama B'maga V'mato. So here we have an example of a Tana who holds that the Shich V'zara B'zov is Matama B'maga V'mato. Ume Meiraglov and it's Meiraglayim. V'dam Anida Metamin Bein B'maga Bein B'masa. Frag the Gemara V'dilma Hachanami. How do you know? Yes, this brisa does say that the Shich V'zara of Azov is Matama B'masa. But how do you know that's because be'etim it's Matama B'masa? Maybe it's because of what Rabbi Yeshua said. Maybe that's also because there's Ziva content. How do you know that Shich V'zera itself is Matama B'masa? Zok Gemara, because if it was Tamei B'masa only because of the Tzchuch Ziva, then it should have been placed differently in the brisa. In Kain Lisanya Gab Zoivoi, we should have said Zoivoi Shal Zoiv, Shich V'zaroi, and then Roikoi. Because Shich V'zaroi is only Tomei because there's Ziva in it. So that's where the Tana should have placed the example of Shich V'zaroi. But since it sticks it after Roik, then it's similar to Reich. Just like Reich, Mineu Bay has a tumah, so to the Shechva Zera itself of a Zoiv, Mineu Bay has a tumah. Ma'ishna the Tani Lagabi Reikai, Ela Mishum da Asimi Reikai. So at the end of the day, we have a three-way machlokes. What is the status of the Shechva Zera of a Zoiv? Rabbi Eliezer holds it's tar. Rabbi Yeshua says we know for sure there's going to be some ziva here, so it's tummy because of that. And our Tana or this brisa holds that the Shechva Zera itself is matama b'masa. I wonder what the nafkamina halalacha would be between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer if you can scientifically analyze this Shechva Zera and confirm with certainty that there's zero content of ziva here. That's where there would be a nafkamina. I'm not sure if that's a good nafkamina.
Why is Shechva Zera less tumor than right? And my reglaim can man auch sagen, als Efsche hat es, wie heißt es, hat es sich ziva, aber Reiko hat es nicht. So if Reiko is mit ham b'masse, wie kann sein, als Fura Shechva Zera is noch nicht? It's any kind of fluid. I feel was kommt raus von der Null?
So you're asking me why is it different than any other ma'ayin hayotzim and azayim? Okay, very good question. Very good question. So I believe. Okay, so what's your other question?
Because even the words mikra loilu is not pinklich because I think Rashi says there as the usually it happens at night, but mikra loilu the same thing. If mikra loilu only means if the hive is niskash, right? So that could happen by day ocha. Says that the lush was the Torah ungehabt just because it doesn't mean actually.
I hear. Okay, no, I hear. You're asking a good question. Why should Shechva Zera be different than any other of the miyanas?
If it's all
okay. Zok to Gemara. I'm going to see if I can find a teretz. I think it's a good question. Zok to Gemara. Omer le Rabacha midifti le Ravina. We're still on the hunt for a Tana that holds that you don't say dayoi even heichad loy mifrach kabachay. So let's see if we can find one. The high Tana, loy darish dayoi, the alpha gav loy mifrach kabachay. I found another Tana who holds that you don't say dayoi, even though the kabachay would still survive, even if you apply the dayoi. The Tanya, Muppets b'meis minai. We know that any beged or keli that's in the oil of mace will become tummy from the mace. Becomes tummy for 7 days. But a Muppet is a mat. It's not a peri, but it's not a beged. It's in between somewhere. How do you know that that's also susceptible to tumas oil if it's found in the oil of a mace? Zok Gemara V'dinu, we learned it out of a Kal V'chomer. And this is the Kal V'chomer that we learned it out. Let's see where our whole time was. We're running quite late. V'dinu, Uma Pachin K'tanim. Oh, now we have the Levina strikes again, because this is the parsha of Pachin K'tanim. So Ma Pachin K'tanim, small little jugs that you can't get a finger into and you can't sit on. They'll be tar b'zov. You know why? Because it's impossible to have tumas maga, because you can't put your finger inside it. And we know clay cheres don't become tummy if you touch the outside. They only become tummy if you touch the inside. But you can't get your finger inside. So shetarim b'zov. Now, maybe they should become tummy b'tumas masa. No, because there's no way anyone's ever going to sit on a jug. And the only thing that are matama, tumas masa, is things that it's normal to put your weight on. If it's something that you normally wouldn't sit on, that's not matama b'mas. So ma'apach and ketanim shetarim b'zov. They're tar by azov because the two methods with which azov can transmit tuma would not apply to pach and ketanim. Nevertheless, matama b'mace, little jugs that sit in an oil of mace, avada will become tummy b'tumas oil. So Muppets shematama b'zov, a Muppet that becomes tummy b'azov, because a Muppet, its job is that you lean on it, you sit on it, you lie on it. So surely it will be able to become tummy from tumas of einoidin. Surely, if it was oil and mace, it should be tummy. But the problem is, if a zav sits on the mat is tummy. You know how long it's tummy for? Just for the day. You toivel it at the end of the day, and now it's tar. But if a mat sits by oil and mace, you know how many days we want to say it's tummy for? For 7 days. Just like a person who's boiling mace. But the Kamaisa law that this price brought a raya that a mafetz will be tummy if it is found in the oil of mace, bein l'tumas erev, bein l'tumas shiva. It's going to be tummy for a whole week. Bamai. Why don't you limit the kal v'chomer with the dayoi? Ema hani kal v'chomer l'tumas erev. You have a kal v'chomer from a zov. A zov sits in the mat. It's only tummy for 1 day. So let's say, yes, you have a kavachomer to say that a mat will be tame if it finds itself in the oil of mace, but it should not be more tame than the armakar. Armakar is ziva, and by ziva it's only tame for one day. Amrlay, that's a very, very good kasha, but you're not the first person who thought of this kasha. Rab, it's an interesting name. That the Tzionim say Rab Nechurai. No, Rab Nechume, right? Rab Nechume bar Zechariah l'Abaye. He asked the question to Abaye, and you know what Abaye told us? That you learned wrong shot in the price. Wamale Abaye Tana mi Muppets b'sheretz ma'isel. There's a chain reaction. The Kavachomer is taka not being used to learn directly from Ziva to Tumas Mace because you have that kasha. There's a daya. It's really we learn from Muppets b'sheretz. Just like a mat can become tummy if a sheretz touches it, we learn from there through a gzer shava. We apply from Muppets b'sheretz to Muppets b'meis that it's tummy tuma shiva. This price that it talks about a kavachomer is the makar for Muppets b'sheretz. How do you know that if a sheretz touches this Muppets, how do you know that it's going to make a tummy? Muppets b'sheretz ma'isla v'achi kamar. Muppets b'sheretz minai. How do we know that if a sheretz touches a Muppets, that it's going to be mitameh? V'dinu uma pachem ketanim, madav pachem ketanim. Shetarim bezov to main b'sheretz, the exact same kavachomer as we tried to use for Tumas Mace. Muppet shetameh bezov ain't edin shetameh b'sheretz, and that you don't need a diet for because when it's tameh b'sheretz, it's also only tameh for one day. So that's a perfect kavachomer. It's only going to be tameh for one day. Now that I know that Muppets b'sheretz is tamei, ela Muppets b'meis minayin. How do I know Muppets b'meis? The teretz is I learn it from Muppets b'sheretz. Muppets b'sheretz got its information that it's tamei. Where did it get it from? It got it from Muppets. It got it from Ziva. Got it from Ziva. But once Muppets b'sheretz is tamei, it's tamei independently. Therefore, with Gzer Shava, I could pass that information on to Muppets b'meis. Nemar, let me finish. Nemar beged v'or b'sheretz. The Torah used the words beged and or by a sheretz, meaning a sheretz that touches beged and or makes it tamei. V'nemar beged v'or b'meis, and the Torah tells us that beged and or that's in the oil of mace becomes tamei. Ma beged v'or ha'amar b'sheretz Muppets tamei boy. Just like when it says beged v'or by sheretz, we know that sheretz is mitama Muppets. How do we know it? Through the kavul chomer that we just made from Ziva. Af beged v'or ha'amar b'meis. So too, when the Torah uses the word beged and or by mace, it means to tell us that Muppets tameh boy, the Muppets will also be susceptible to the tumah of a mace. Zokimar mufna. This Gzer Shava has to be mufna, meaning the words beged and or, both by mace and by sheretz, have to be an extra word. The Eloi mufna, if they're not extra, ikal mifrach, there's a kasha you can ask that will destroy the kavachayim. And what is it? I'm sorry, that will destroy the Gzer Shava. And I could say, only sheretz is tamei b'Muppets. You know why? Mal sheretz shechem tamei b'chadasha. Sheretz is a huge chomer. A tiny, tiny little piece of sheretz will make something tamei because of tumas sheretz. Tamer b'meis shein tamei b'chadasha al b'chazayis. In order for tumas meis to make tumah, there has to be a kazayis. So maybe dafka Muppets is tamei by tumas sheretz because you see tumas sheretz has chomers to it. Even tiny little things can become tumah, could make tumah. But by a mace, maybe it's more lenient, and therefore a mace wouldn't be able to be tamah Muppets. Zokmer la'ayaf nuimuf. Which side, or in fact, it has to be mufti. In fact, it does have to be mufti. But which side is mufti? Mirti, let's see. Sheretz ishkis l'shich v'zera. Sheretz, anyway, we have a hekesh between sheretz and shich v'zera, so whatever you apply to shich v'zera, we can apply to sheretz as well. What does it say there? And right after that, the pasuk talks about sheretz. So therefore, we're going to learn halachas from shich v'zera to sheretz. In the parsha of shich v'zera, the Torah tells us the chol beged, the cholar asher yiyal of shich v'zera. It already says beged and or is something that's subject to tumah shich v'zera. So therefore, we know that a sheretz, because of a hekesh, could also be mitama by beged and or. So beged var because of achron b'sheretz lamali. Why did the Torah have to repeat by sheretz that a sheretz can be mitama beged var? Shemamin lafni, it's extra. So we have one side of the Gzer Shava that's extra. Vakati moved the mitzarecha. So you only found that it's extra on the sheret side. Is it also extra on the Tumas May side? If you hold, if it's a mufta mitzad you could learn the Gzera Shava, even though I have a logical argument against the Gzera Shava. That a sheret is more chomer because Matama v'chadasha shopper, you're good because you could learn it against a logical argument. According to the Mandam holds that if it's only mufta mitzad although you make a Gzera Shava, you could make a logical argument against it. We're stuck. How do I learn from sherets to Misa? Maybe Misa is more chomer and is more kill, and therefore Misa. A mace will not be metara mafetz. Michael Nemer. So the mace not the beged and or mentioned by mace is also extra. You don't need it. You know why? Because you also know it from shich v'zera. Michti mace is just shich v'zera as well. The chsiva nageh b'chol tmei nefesh. Or you should take him in shich v'zera. Chsiva b'shich v'zera b'chol beged v'chol. It already tells us the shich v'zera is metama beged and or. Ashiyah love shich v'zera, and therefore we already know through that hekish that a mace is a metama beged and or. So therefore beged var the chsiva achmana b'mace lo mali. Why did I need the Torah to tell me that by Meishes of Tama Beged Anar, I know it from the Hekesh that I learned by Shich Vazera? So since the word Beged Anar, Sai by Sheretz is extra, Sai by Meis is extra, and I have a halacha by Sheretz that it can be Mitama Muppets, so too a Meis can be Mitama Muppets. But the problem is, we're still limited. Because by a Sheretz, what type of Tumah will the Muppets get? Only Tumah for one day. Because the sheretz could only make tumah for one day. So if the whole makar of Muppets by mace is tumah from sheretz, by sheretz you only know it's from tumah one day. How do I know that all of the rules of tumas mace will apply to this Muppets and there could also be tumah for 7 days? So if you learn that the way you apply Gzera Shava is you import a concept. We import a concept that this tumah applies to Muppets. Now, okay, so it applies to tumas mace as well. Now that it applies to Tumas Mace, whatever the rules of Tumas Mace impact anything else that it touches, like Beged and Nor, it'll also impact Muppets the same way, which would be Shiva. That would be Gavaltic. When you're importing a halacha, you can't make more of it than where you imported it from. Since you only have a makar of Tumas Muppets from Sheretz, which limits it to 1 day, you can't import it and now suddenly say it morphs into regular Tumas Mace. And it's all 7 days. It's a little bit of a form of diet. In fact, it is. I'm happy you asked that. It's a form of diet. So hold that question. It'll be relevant in just a second. Amar Rava, Amar Kro, you're right. But it says v'chibastem bigdeichem b'yoyim hashvi. There's a special pasuk by Mace that tells us v'chibastem bigdeichem b'yoyim hashvi to teach us kol tmeos sha'atem etamen b'mace, any tumah that you learn by a mace, by definition, it automatically is a 7-day tumah, lo yipchusu mishiv. So therefore, even though there's a limitation of dain min amunah, which as Mati says is the dayoy of a Gzera Shava, the pasuk by Mace tells you that any tumah you learn anywhere, ignore dain min amunah. It's got to be 7 days. Frek Toishvis Mati's kasha. Where do we start from? We started from a direct kal v'chomer from a ziva to Mace, and we had to import it because of the dayoy. But now we have the pasuk of the chibastem b'gdeichem. So let's go back to our original kal v'chomer, and the same way you're going to overrule dain min amunah using the pasuk of the chibastem b'gdeichem b'yom hashvi, use the pasuk to overrule the dayoy. I thought that's what you were driving at, right? So to push the kasha. So let's see Toshis for 1 second. It's a small Toshis. Zok Toshis over kol v'chibastem b'gdeichem v'ptamer v'gdoshis. So v'leim v'kal v'chomer to be clear. So let's go back to square one, where you can learn the kal v'chomer directly from a ziva to Tumas Mace. I dayo, it shouldn't be Tami Tumas Shiva. I have a pasuk of Echibastim. I got very excited about the kasha because I don't understand the terms. Let's see what Tosh says. Da Tuma dichsiv behedya mashmalei kra. The pasuk of the Echibastim begechem b'yom hashvi says that any Tumas Mace applies for 7 days, but only those Tumas Mace that are written beferish. So you can ask the Talmud beferish, it's either Kal v'chomer or it's Gzera Shava. There's only written beferish. So Tosh is the hash to the Yafin and Mace B'Gzera Shava, Avagav the Sheretz Gufeika meaning the Kal v'chomer, even though you only know Sheretz is Matama by Mavet to the Kal v'chomer from Ziva, but Lamaisa you use the Gzera Shava to transmit it from Sheretz to Mace. Therefore, Kikosav V'Hedya Choshev Lei. We consider Kosav V'Hedya. No, the Kash is not Geschmacker, and that's Moti's Kash. Gewaltig.
I mean, why did
very good. Gewaltig. Thank you. Thank you. Guy Master.
Ik versta
There's a
niet.
television show it's all about puppets. It's called Muppets.
It's not that.
So you're asking me a gewaltige kasha.